everyone, my name is Liz, and today I just wanted to give you a quick rundown. I'm going to do the mid-year freakout tag because it's the end of June. It is now right in the middle of the year, which is so crazy. Can't believe we're already this far into 2022. But I've read quite a bit. Right now in my notes I have that I read 43 books, and ever since I wrote these up, I've read a few more. I've now read 45 books. My original goal for the year was to read 25, but I finished that pretty early. I've been on quite the reading roll this year. So I know, it's crazy. I bumped up my goal to 50, and then after I got into the 40s, and it's only the middle of the year, I started thinking that maybe I should bump up my reading goal even more. So right now, my reading goal for 2022 is to read 75 books. So hopefully I didn't overshoot that. Hopefully I'm not struggling to finish that by the end of the year. But thankfully, I've really been enjoying reading this year. There are some years I just wind up in a slump. Last year and the year before were kind of that way, but that is not the case for this year, and I'm very happy about that. So I'm just gonna start this tag. I love watching these. They're so much fun. I've watched so many so far this year. So yeah, here are some of the questions. Here's the first question. What's the best book you've read so far? And without a doubt, it has to be Almond by Won Pyun Son. And this book was so amazing. I think I read this back in maybe April, maybe March. It was a few months ago, but I keep thinking about it. And I'm pretty sure I might have mentioned it before in a video, but I really wanted to bring it up again because it is so good. It just really opened my eyes to different ways of writing. The synopsis for this book is the main character was born with a brain condition called alexithymia, which makes it hard for him to feel emotions like fear or anger. So he has this condition, and he's had it ever since he was very young, of course, and it's all about him growing up. It really is a coming of age story, and we get to learn all about him and his family dynamic. And sadly, there is a tragedy that happens pretty early into the book that kind of switches up his life, and he has to just kind of learn how to go about life on his own without the help of his family. I don't think that's much of a spoiler. I think they say just a shocking act of random violence shatters his world. And that's just that sets the tone for this book. But there are a lot of sad things that happen in this book, but the way that emotions are written are so interesting because the main character can't really feel emotion the way that other people do. It's described very physically, like when you're falling in love, it's not really explained in the way that you would feel emotionally, but the way you would feel physically, like butterflies in your stomach or things like that. So just little details like that really opened my eyes just to different ways of writing, but also different, like a totally different experience that I hadn't learned of before this book. And I'm so happy that I read it. I'm going to recommend this book again and again this year because it was just so good. I'm so happy I read it. By far, it's the best book I've read this year. Nothing else I've read has really topped this. But I'm reading some really good books right now and coming up, so maybe it'll top it. I don't know. On my Instagram, I've been doing a bracket system sort of thing since the beginning of the year. So far, this is winning the bracket. I can try to put that somewhere in this video so that you guys can see what I have going on so far. But yeah, this is winning. We'll see if this holds the top place of the best book I've read so far. We shall see by the end of the year. So question number 2, the best sequel you've read so far. I haven't read very many series. The ones that I have are actually all middle grade, but I think, kind of considering what I've read, I think it has to be The Black Cauldron, which is the second book in the Prydain Chronicles by Lloyd Alexander. This was so fun. I featured reading at least the first book in this series in a video a few months ago, back when I was on spring break, I think. But this was such a romp. Something I love about middle grade books is how quickly you just get launched into the action. I think that something in adult fantasy books and just adult fiction in general is sometimes you tend to dilly-dally and, you know, get around to the beginning of the story in a really roundabout way. That was not the case with this. Like 3 pages in, you're just rocketed into the story. It was the same with the first book. This book I think was even better than the first book, which is always such a treat, always so exciting. And I haven't read the third book yet, but hopefully I will soon before the end of the year. But if you're into middle grade books, if you like that sort of cozy feeling, this is such a good one. It definitely has sort of a almost Wheel of Time feel, but like Wheel of Time Junior. I don't know. I think that if you'd like that vibe of that series, you might like this if you also like reading middle grade novels. So yeah, highly recommend this if you're in the market for middle grade fantasy. So question number 3, new releases you want to read. And the one that I have to talk about that pretty much everyone is talking about right now is Book Lovers by Emily Henry. I'm so excited about this one. I've recently read Beach Read by Emily Henry. It was so good. I loved it so much. And I'm reading this for Morgan Long's Patreon book club. So no matter what, I am reading this within the next month. And I cannot wait. It seems like such a romp. Her writing is so just, it's like reading a movie. It's like reading a rom-com. She just sucks me right in and I can't get enough. I love her characters as well. They're so much fun. And I've heard nothing but good things about this book. Everybody's been talking about it and I've been dying to read it. I cannot wait to read this. And this is, like I said, I'm going to be reading this very, very soon. So I can't wait to share my thoughts on this as well. Okay, so question number 4, what is your most anticipated to still be released in 2022? I think I wrote that question down wrong, but 2 books that I'm really excited about. One I already have. I got my hands on this copy a few days ago, but it technically came out yesterday. It's Labvona by Otessa Moshfegh. Technically, I haven't read any Otessa Moshfegh yet. Hopefully, I will soon. I'll probably start with another one of her books before this. Some of the trigger warnings I've read for this book seem pretty intense, but it also sounds really good. Basically, like everything I know is that this is set in medieval times, and yeah, it's an interesting looking cover, but I'm really excited about it. I think it'll be good, and I really lucked out. The Barnes & Noble where I went had a signed copy, so I'm happy to have that in my collection regardless. And I also wanted to mention 2 more books that I don't currently have, and I think are coming out either soon-ish or a little bit later in the year. The first book I want to talk about is, I am a big fan of the Books Unbound podcast, and recently they found out and shared that Gabrielle Zevin, who wrote Teenage Amnesiac and The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery, is releasing a new book called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow on July 5th. So that's coming up pretty soon. I'm so excited. The Storied Life of A.J. Fickery was my favorite book from last year. Out of all the books I read, I still think about that one so often. I want to reread it constantly, and her writing was just so good. And from what I've heard, the little I've heard about this book, it seems like it's a book about video games and also maybe some other things. But I think no matter what in the future, I want to read all of Gabrielle Zevin's books, so whatever she puts out there I will read. I'm very excited to get my hands on a copy of that. The last book that I'll mention for future releases for 2022 is Babel by R.F. Kuang, which comes out on August 23rd. And I've seen a lot of buzz about this book so far. I'm so sad it's not out yet. I've really been wanting to get my hands on a copy. But from what I've heard, it sounds like it has a lot of dark academia vibes. I love that sort of thing. So since it's coming out in August, maybe that'll be a fun fall read. So yeah, super excited about that one. And those are the releases that I'm most anticipating so far for the end of the year. So the next question is my biggest disappointment. And this is actually a book I read within the last few days. I was really struggling because if I'm not enjoying a book, I tend to just DNF it pretty much right off the bat. I don't like to waste my time. This book, I think I posted about it on my Instagram story. It is Milkfed by Melissa Broder, and I really wanted to like this book. And the audiobook that I was listening to was so short, so I just decided to power through to see if it got better at any point. And it didn't, not for me. But the reason why I didn't like Milkfed was just because there were some things that I found really triggering. It was about a woman who's living in Los Angeles, and it's basically documenting her struggles with an eating disorder, but also kind of falling in love at some point. She's also dealing with issues and tribulations that she has with her mother, because her mother was very just not body positive, really encouraged her disordered eating growing up. And I did read the trigger warnings for this. I've struggled with an eating disorder in the past, and so I don't really struggle reading about it. I'm very much healed to the fact that I can handle that sort of subject matter, you know, to a certain extent. But the way that it was handled in this book, I didn't love. I felt like it was just a plot point in the beginning of the book that wasn't really developed by the end of the book. By the time that the main character, I read it a few days ago and I cannot remember the character's name. Should have taken notes. But by the time she meets her love interest, this other girl who works at her favorite yogurt shop, the disordered eating kind of fell to the wayside, and I felt like it was a wasted opportunity to really explore it. I just felt like it was kind of handled sloppily, at least coming from my perspective. But that's just my opinion. If you liked it, more power to you. That's just how I felt. I felt pretty disappointed by the end of the book. Didn't love the ending. So just overall a big disappointment all around, because I've been really dying to read Melissa Broder's books. I have a copy of The Pisces that I've had on my shelves for at least 3 years, and now I'm like, oh, should I read it? I know I'm going to, but I hope that I don't dislike it as much as I disliked Milkfed. So the next question is biggest surprise. It was A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, which was so good. I feel like not many people have talked about it. I initially heard from it from Emmy. I listened to it at work. It was a super short audiobook, and I loved it. It was basically a story of Dracula. However, we never hear Dracula's name, so it could be a retelling of Dracula. It might not be a retelling. So there's kind of like a fun question mark as to who the characters actually are. But it's about Dracula's brides. It's about the toxic relationship they have with him as they go through centuries and centuries of history that honestly, as the reader, I kind of wanted to know more about what was going on in the times that they were living in. It basically starts in the medieval area and it ends in, I think, around the 1920s. So there's so much history that's covered and mentioned, and it's very, I don't know, it's very sexy. It has so many like interesting sort of romantic scenes I found so entrancing. I thought it was so fun. It was a great audiobook to just listen to in a day. That was a fun one. Definitely a big surprise. So the next question is new fictional crush. And novel-wise, I really don't think I have anybody that can possibly top Howl from Howl's Moving Castle. I'm sorry, but that's just the truth. Manga-wise, I love Kakashi from Naruto. I feel like that is a very popular opinion. Who doesn't love Kakashi from Naruto? And Kyo from Fruits Basket. I love Fruits Basket. It's been one of my favorite mangas that I've read so far this year. It's such a cute story and I love it so much, and I love the dynamics. The relationship dynamics in that manga are so much fun. I've definitely fallen in love with all the characters in Fruits Basket, so maybe not just Kyo. So the next question, my new favorite author, I feel like it would have to be Agatha Christie. I have this book right here, Death on the Nile. I read this recently. I've also read And Then There Were None. I'm currently reading The Mysterious Affair at Styles. I don't know why I've all of a sudden really gotten into Agatha Christie, but her books are always so much fun to read. They're really quick. I rip through them within a couple days typically, and every time I feel like I have one of her mysteries sorted out and I know what's going on, she really just flips a 180 on me, and I'm always surprised at the end, and I just love that feeling. They're just so much fun to get into, and I'm really happy that I've gotten into Agatha Christie this year so far, and I have no intentions of stopping before the end of the year. A book that made me cry. This is another recent read. I don't typically cry at books. However, there is always one or two every year. Last year, the only book that made me cry, I'm pretty sure, was The Storied Life of A.J. Vickery, which I had mentioned before. But this year so far, it's been The Perks of Being a Wallflower. And this is definitely not the only time I've read this. This was a reread for me. I read this over and over when I was in high school, and I don't think I'd read it since then. And I reread it because Books Unbound, their Patreon, they do a movie club and they watched Perks of Being a Wallflower. And I reread it for that. And oh my gosh, rereading it as an adult just gave me a completely different perspective of everything that happened. I kind of almost forgot how good it is. I mean, I knew I loved it, but oh my god, everything that happens. There are so many difficult things that happen to Charlie and his friends in this book that are terrible and really scary when you're a kid, but the way that everything is handled and how sensitive Charlie is just so well done. And the reason why it made me cry, which I thought I would mention, I was reading and listening to the audiobook to this on Scribd, and little did I know that the audiobook version that they have is the 20th edition, and they had an afterword that was almost like a letter written by Charlie, but I'm guessing it was also like a note from Steven Shabatsky as well. The way the new afterword was written is it's basically just formatted like another one of Charlie's letters, because this book is an epistolary novel technically. The way it's told is it's all letters from Charlie to a random person he's never met, and this new note is basically Charlie writing to that same person 20 years later. And it was so beautiful. It really surprised me. I wasn't expecting it. Back when I read this in high school, I don't think this 20th anniversary edition had been released. So it was a big surprise, and the afterword, it just made me cry. It really, kind of made everything feel much more full circle, especially rereading it as an adult. So if you have access to Scribd and you have an interest in rereading this or reading this for the first time, I would definitely recommend the 20th anniversary edition, because oh my god, it was just such a beautiful way to end the story anew. Just make it, it was beautiful. Next is a book that made me happy, and I have to say, I've been working on reading Fruits Basket. Like I said, this story makes me so happy. I've binge watched the show, the anime, over and over at least 4 or 5 times now, and I only discovered it in early spring, so if that's saying anything. But I've been so enjoying reading the manga as well. It's been so fun. I love the characters, I love the story. If you've never heard of Fruits Basket before, it's basically this girl who kind of gets wrapped into this world of this family who have this curse put upon them that whenever they touch somebody of the opposite sex, they turn into an animal from the Chinese zodiac. I hope I explained that right, but it's so charming, it's so fun, it's so cute. I love it so much, and I feel like this is just something that is gonna be a cozy reread for me. Every time I reread this, I feel like I could just flip it open into any part of it and just know exactly what's going on. Yeah, so fun. I haven't finished reading the manga yet, but hopefully by the end of the year I'll be just chugging along. Maybe not finished. There's quite a lot of these collector's editions and I only read them here and there, but yeah, hopefully I'll read more of this in the year to come. So the next question is, what is the most beautiful book that you've bought? And currently I feel like it has to be the Anne of Green Gables Treasury. But so basically it has little recipes of things that are mentioned in Anne of Green Gables. There's also little facts about what was going on at the time when the story was taking place in the late 1800s and early 1900s. There's some really beautiful illustrations, like, look at that, along with excerpts from the book itself. And isn't that beautiful? That's just gorgeous. I love the look of it. It's just so cozy. I'm so happy I found it. It's obviously secondhand and it was kind of hidden, tucked away in the bookstore where I found it. So yeah, definitely super excited about this. It also has little blurbs about flowers and the different seasons. There's just all different kinds of stuff about gardening and cooking, and it's just so much fun. It's a fun coffee table book. It's just something, you know, cute to have to refer to when I'm reading Anne of Green Gables. But this is just such a sweet find. I'm really happy I found it. And I feel like, I mean, I've bought way too many books this year, but I feel like this is definitely the prettiest so far. And then, what do you want to read before 2022 ends? I'm really excited to read these, if not by the end of the summer, definitely by the fall. I am so excited to read Sorcery of Thorns by Margaret Rogerson and The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman. So first, about Sorcery of Thorns, so many people I love have recommended this. Recently, the Clockwork Reader, Hannah, has talked about this book. She did a video about this. Carrie Can Read also has talked about this a lot, and it just sounds right up my alley. Basically, all I know is everybody has said that it's like a YA Howl's Moving Castle, or at least it has Howl's Moving Castle vibes. That's one of my favorite books of all time. And apparently the main character wants to work in a library. That's also a big parallel. I just feel like there's going to be so much to love about this book. And if anything has Howl Moving Castle vibes, I want to read it. So I'm super excited to read this. Hopefully I'll get around to this soon. I've had this on my shelf for well over a year, so it's about time that I read this. The Book of Magic by Alice Hoffman. I'm definitely reading this at least by October. I feel like this is going to be such a fun spooky season read, but this is, I think, the final installment in Alice Hoffman's Practical Magic series, which is one of my favorite series. I don't like reading series all that much, but Alice Hoffman is a completely different story. I love Practical Magic. I've loved all the books that she's had so far, and this actually came out last year and I never got around to reading it, which makes me so sad. I don't know why I did that, but I cannot wait to read this and close out the Practical Magic story. I feel like it's going to be really sad, but this is definitely going to be something that I reread, at least the whole series. I feel like the beautiful thing about this series is that each book kind of is its own story. You don't necessarily need to have read the other books to enjoy the other one. Super excited to read this. It's been way too long. I need to read it. I just need to read it. I don't know why. I feel like I've been sitting on it because I'm scared it's not going to be as good as I imagined, but that's silly and I just need to read it. So I'm calling myself out. If I haven't read it by like November at least, call me out. So for the final question, who are my favorite community members? So who are my favorite booktubers right now? I have a list, but first I have to say this isn't a YouTube, it's a podcast. I have to mention Books Unbound with Ariel Bissett and Raylene LeMay. I listen to this podcast every single week. It makes my Monday. That's when I listen to the new episode. I listen to it every Monday on my way to work. It's so fun. It's just like sitting with your friends talking about books, and I will never stop loving that podcast. It's always so much fun. But some of the other booktubers I love are Morgan Long, Sheila Joy, Emmy, Jocelyn Reeds, Catherine Karras, Randy Lynn, Carrie Can Read, The Clockwork Reader, and Sally Thames. Those are just some of the booktubers that I've been enjoying so far. Because life gets so busy, I feel like I don't watch as much YouTube as I would like, but whenever I see a video come in from any of those people, I try to watch them as soon as I possibly can. Thank you so much for watching. I think I'm gonna close this out here. I am so excited to share the rest of my reading year with you. I'm gonna try to post more frequently, at least before the beginning of the school year in September. Be sure to stay tuned and like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you so much for watching.